What actually happens in the fourth trimester, and what is the fourth trimester? I'm sure you've seen that or heard that in a bunch of different videos, content online, and all of that. But the fourth trimester is something that I feel like is just so misunderstood. First and foremost, I usually record outside, recording inside because in sunny Florida, we're getting some thunderstorms. And so really didn't want to get my equipment soaked, and I didn't want to get soaked myself. Also, I'm home with my son. So if you start to hear or see someone, that's totally normal. But Dr. Kaylee here, owner, founder of the Hope Doctors Pelvic Floor Physical Therapy. Super excited to be talking about this topic today. It's something that I feel like is misunderstood, and it's also just kind of like communicated about without a really good I don't know. I don't even know like what to, without a good understanding of it, I should say. So the fourth trimester, what does that mean? That is technically the first 3 months after you have your baby, because if you think about it, each trimester, it's technically like 3 months, just a certain amount of weeks, whatever. They break it up into pregnancy that way. However, the fourth trimester is those first 3 months after pregnancy. I tend to say that it should be a lot longer than that. I tend to tell clients it's the first year. I consider the whole first year postpartum as the first trimester because of how the healing happens and because of some things not popping up initially, but maybe they pop up later. So super important to understand that too, like that's the timeline. And it's important to understand too that like pregnancy, when we're pregnant and we're growing an entire human inside of our bodies are really adjusting to that. We're adjusting to the weight of the baby. We're adjusting to the stretch of our tissues and the pelvic floor and the core, everywhere else. We're adjusting to the decreased mobility and function in our body because of growing the baby. Our posture changes, everything changes, right? The ability to activate muscles correctly changes as well. And so it's important to understand that. And then if we have a vaginal delivery, I'll talk about both, but if we have a vaginal delivery, our pelvic floor stretches up to 5 times its normal length. And so that's something that we need to heal from. And we also notice too that like our muscles in our core, our belly muscles, they stretch a lot and then they kind of contract or retract a lot. And it's so important to understand that and to recognize that. And so is giving you guys a little bit of clarity of like pregnancy is hard. It's hard on our bodies sometimes, and everyone heals differently. So if you're reading this, listening to this, or whatever it is, and whatever week you are postpartum, it is okay if you're not 100%.
Home and
Okay.
and do out, and then I will put a button and then it will jump out.
Okay. He's cleaning the house with our vacuum. So it's really important to understand that pregnancy it changes our body, right? So the stretch of the tissue needs time to heal. And I think too, like there's this false perception that 6 weeks postpartum, when you go and you get your 6 week check-in, that you were just released and you should do everything that you want. And I feel like that causes a lot of issue with us, right? Because at 6 weeks, if you don't feel good, or if you don't feel like you're ready to have sex, or if you don't feel like you're ready to exercise, nothing's wrong with you, but they make you feel like there is, right? Because you should be good. And that's just inaccurate information. What they're checking for at the 6 week postpartum check in, which is an important appointment, is infection risk. Did stitches heal if you had them and all of that? Then go see a pelvic floor therapist, because we're going to be honest with you. We're going to tell you where your tissue healing is. Usually takes 8 to 12 weeks for the tissue to fully heal. Usually takes longer than that for us to get our functional return back, right? So it's important to understand that there's different factors there. And I don't want you to feel like you're broken, because you're not. Even if you've had your 6 week check in and they're like, you're great, and you're like, no, I'm not. That's okay. You're still okay. But during pregnancy, if we have a vaginal delivery, the amount of changes that happen in our pelvic floor, you could have a stretch of a nerve, right, with birth, because of the sciatic nerve and where those nerves go through the back, through the butt, through the pelvic floor. You could have a nerve injury that could contribute to longer time needed for. All right. That.
It has hot.
Oh, okay. That could contribute to a longer time of healing. If you have nerve related injuries, you could have had an avulsion or a tearing of the muscle on the inside of the pelvic floor. That also requires more healing. If you had prolapse during birth, if we had forceps use, if we had vacuum use, there's so many different variations of healing that would change this fourth trimester time frame, okay? So your healing is going to be different than your friend who had a baby 2 weeks earlier, right? Like everything is different person to person, because it's all very dependent on how pregnancy went, how birth went. If you had a cesarean, you might feel fantastic when that is completely healed and that glue is fine. But 6 months down the road, a lot of my clients are now like, oh, all of a sudden I have leakage. It's still something to consider. It's still something to keep in mind that we want to address and we want to work on. Okay. So just keep those things in mind, that it's important to recognize that your journey is going to be very different than mine, than anyone else's. It's very different. I also want to reiterate that vaginal birth and cesarean, they do heal differently, but they both heal on a different timeline too, because they're a different process. And so it's also important to understand, having a major surgery like a cesarean, while you might feel okay and ready to have sex at 6 weeks, 6 to 8 months down the road, are we still supporting our pelvic floor? We can't just ignore it. People falsely think that having a cesarean means you will have no pelvic floor issues, and that's inaccurate too. So this fourth trimester time is very dependent on how that birth went, right? So like for someone, for example, who had easy labor and delivery, no tearing, no issues postpartum, meaning like they healed pretty good, in 6 to 8 weeks, they might feel ready to start exercising. They don't have any pressure and heaviness. They don't have any leakage. They're not having any pain anywhere. They're feeling pretty normal. Then yeah, they might be ready to start exercise, but I still challenge there needs to be a foundation first. Like, can you connect to your pelvic floor? Can you connect to your core? Are you breathing? Are we sleeping? What's our nursing posture or a feeding posture? Going through all of that is very important. And then we want to think about the person who maybe had a challenging labor. Maybe your labor was 3 to 4 days. Maybe you had to transfer from a home birth to the hospital. Maybe you ended up having an emergency cesarean, or you had some tearing with your vaginal delivery. Maybe there's prolapse symptoms. It doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It just means that your birth experience was different. And so that needs different healing access, right? Like you need different information. You need different cueing. You need different support. That is okay. Everyone's birth story deserves the best support for them. And I think that that's something that is just missing in the world. And as a pelvic floor PT, it's so important that we show up for you with what happened and how it was processed, and also your emotional well being. How are you feeling about birth? For example, I had a client recently, she really wanted an epidural. Her labor and delivery was so fast that she did not get an epidural. She's still healing from that. She didn't want to feel anything, and she did. And so now she's having to process that being different. Other clients who want a VBAC and they don't get that, or other clients who really want a home birth and then they have to transfer, or you have your home birth and then you still feel unsupported postpartum, or you have a birth and then you now have prolapse, or you're leaking, or you tried to have sex at 6 weeks and now it's painful. Like all of this within that fourth trimester is treatable. And it's so important that you know that there's support out there for you, and that you deserve that support, and that everyone's support needs to be different. It does not look the same for everyone, and that's okay. That's really the main thing at the fourth trimester, is finding what kind of support. And again, I challenge that fourth trimester needs to be about a year. Some challenge that it needs to be about 18 months to 2 years, because it takes that much time, emotional, physical, all of that, to come back to that normal state, or to make you feel like you're normal again. It takes time for your body to get back to that. And it's so important that you're okay with that and you go into this understanding that. But I'm curious, I really want to know in the comments, or send me an email, whatever you want to do. Tell me how your fourth trimester experience was. What was postpartum like for you? Little bit of a real moment here. For me, it was very hard. I didn't actually have any prolapse symptoms until 6 weeks postpartum, and went to the midwife, and she was like, yeah, you have prolapse, like it was nothing. And I'm a pelvic PT, so I knew I had prolapse, right? But I didn't know, because my labor and delivery was really fast. I couldn't catch up. Had a hard time slowing down, a lot of other factors there. But I didn't I didn't understand why it was happening later, even though I'm the clinician, right? It was very interesting. And then 6 months postpartum, my postpartum depression kicked in. I was totally fine emotionally until 6 months, and then everything hit me at once. And it was a very hard experience. And I remember that being eye opening for me in the fourth trimester, that we tell people, like, after the first 3 months postpartum, you're good, you're fine, you should be great. I wasn't. I wasn't good, fine, or great. And I felt really terrible. And I had a really hard time adjusting to that. I didn't have a village. We don't live near family. So we had to find our village and sometimes pay for it. It was really difficult. And so I'm here to support you in your story and your postpartum journey. And I would love to hear what that fourth trimester looked like for you, and like what you thought it was. How long did you think that would last? But until then, I am here for you. I love you. I hope you have hope and enjoy the rest of your day.